a whole 20% of the value of cargo transported through the Hormuz Strait. And it's not Iran that plans to charge such a fee, but the United States of America. The US Army has sharply intensified the war in the Middle East. Large-scale fires can be seen in Iranian cities, and Donald Trump announced that there will be no more deals. But what really shocked everyone was a completely different statement from the American president. For almost half a year, Washington fought with Iran under one slogan: no one has the right to charge money for passage through the Strait of Hormuz. US Secretary of State Rubio even put it bluntly: there is not a single nation on earth that supports charging for passage through straits. Trump himself called any fees unacceptable on June 24, and at the G7 summit in Evian he promised that the strait would be free and duty-free forever. But today, July 13, Trump announced that the US is taking control of the strait and will charge 20% of the value of all goods. Not $2 million per ship as Iran wanted, but a whole 20% of the value of the entire cargo. Iran, by the way, has already responded to the American president's intention. In this episode, we'll break down exactly what Donald Trump said today. How many times does his tariff exceed Iran's? Is this even legal under maritime law, and why? Is this a boomerang that will come back to America all the way in the South China Sea? Well, we'll also discuss what's really happening in the Strait, where the US used kamikaze sea drones for the first time and Iran is striking at 5 countries at once. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss all this together. But before we start, please subscribe to this YouTube channel because we're moving toward 300,000 subscribers. I would personally appreciate your subscription. So, right at the very beginning, let me share this high-profile quote from Donald Trump, which has already been picked up by media outlets around the world. Trump, in a phone interview for Fox News, said, quote, "We will hold the Hormuz Strait and probably control it. We will become its protector. Maybe call ourselves the guardian angel of the Strait, and for that, we should be paid. We have guarded the Strait for 50 years and have never been paid for it. We guarded it for free, but now we will guard it and we will get paid big money. And we'll probably..."
And we will hold the Strait and probably manage it. We will become the protector of the Strait, maybe call ourselves the guardian angel of the Strait. We should be reimbursed for that. When we do that, we'll be reimbursed because the other wealthy nations support us. We can't be expected to do that for nothing as we did for years. You know, we guarded the Strait for 50 years or more and we never got paid for it. They made all the money and the United States was just, they wouldn't. It's amazing. We guarded it for nothing, and now we're going to guard it, and we're going to get paid for guarding it. It's a lot of money, but we just want to be reimbursed for doing all of this, for putting our people in danger.
Many people here thought that since there were no specifics, Trump was just blowing hot air again. Then came a post from Donald Trump on the social network Truth Social, this time with a number. Quote, "From now on, the United States will be known as guardian of the Hormuz Strait. But in this regard, and for the sake of fairness, the US will receive compensation amounting to 20% of the value of all transported goods. Cover all expenses needed to secure this highly unstable region. Preparations will start immediately. The Strait," Trump adds, "is open and will remain open with or without Iran. Only Iran and its clients will be blocked. Everyone else will have access under the protection of the United States of America." And at the same time, Trump announced the resumption of the naval blockade of Iran. As you can see, Trump made a complete 180-degree turn in his own policy. Back at the end of June, the official position of the US was exactly the opposite. The Trump administration kept insisting that ships should pass through the Hormuz Strait without paying any fees to anyone. This was the basis for the entire moral and legal argument against Tehran, claiming that Iranian tariffs were illegal, that it was racketeering, and that the freedom of navigation was sacred. Now Washington is doing exactly what it actually bombed Iran for. The only difference is that it calls it not a tariff, but reimbursement of expenses. To be fair, there was a hint of this before. It's not something new. A few days after signing the 60-day truce on June 17, Trump already wrote that there would be no tariffs. Then there's a quote, unless they are imposed by the United States and for the United States in case the deal is not completed, for services rendered as the guardian angel of Middle Eastern countries. So the idea was brewing, and you could say that Trump did warn that if Iran violated the deal, he was actually ready to go for the actual seizure of the Hormuz Strait. But this doesn't really reassure oil traders, and this is where things get really interesting because the numbers just hit hard. Let's just compare here what Iran wanted, what Trump wants now, and what would be more beneficial from a pragmatic point of view. Pure pragmatism. For now, let's set aside the moral argument that a terrorist regime in Iran should never be allowed to control the Strait of Hormuz. Let's set that aside for now. According to the New York Times, Iran wanted to set a tariff of up to $2 million per ship, and even that would be shared with Oman. So they wanted to split those $2 million 50-50 with Oman. Economists estimated that such a tariff would increase costs by about 20%. That's $1 for every barrel of oil. So obviously this passage fee would just be included in the price of oil. What does Trump want now? 20% of the cargo's value. Let's do the math using a real example from recent Bloomberg data. The supertanker Humanity, which set out into the Arabian Sea, was carrying 2 million barrels of Iranian oil. And with the Brent crude price now at about $79 per barrel, the total value of the cargo is about $158 million. And 20% is about $31 million from one vessel. That means this American security fee is about 15 times higher than what Iran was demanding. With one caveat, Iran won't be able to sell its oil even if these fees are paid, and this is finally real sanctions pressure. The scale of the flow is also kind of impressive. Before the war, about 20 million barrels of oil passed through the Strait every day. A fifth of the world's seaborne oil and about 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas. And in total, roughly about 3,000 ships per month. If the flow had resumed, and if Donald Trump's tariff had worked, we would be talking about tens of billions of dollars a year for passage through the Strait of Hormuz. So Trump isn't exaggerating when he says there will be big money. But is all of this legal? The short answer is no. The Strait of Hormuz is a natural international strait, falling under Part 3 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The key principle of this third part is as follows. The right of transit passage belongs to all ships and cannot be subject to any tolls. Article 26 explicitly prohibits charging ships simply for passage. Article 42, its second paragraph prohibits discrimination based on the flag. And Trump has just announced that Iranian ships and their clients will not be allowed access to the Hormuz Strait. And this is exactly that same discrimination based on the flag. Iran's supporters, of course, have a solid argument. They say, what about, for example, the Suez Canal or the Bosphorus? They say, well, they charge money for passage there, so why can't they charge money for passage through the Hormuz Strait? The answer is very simple, very simple. The Suez is, after all, a man-made canal. It operates under the Constantinople Convention of 1888. The Bosphorus operates under the Montreux Convention of 1936. Both sea straits have long been excluded from the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. But the Hormuz Strait is not excluded. It clearly falls under the scope of this convention. A fee for passage through, mind you, a natural strait would actually be the first in history. It would set a precedent. There is, of course, an interesting historical precedent here that is definitely worth mentioning. Denmark once collected the so-called sound dues in its straits and abolished them in 1857 under pressure from international protests. That is, the whole world, 170 years ago, decided that you shouldn't have to pay for passage through straits at all. Trump is proposing to completely roll back this decision, but the most serious consequence in this whole story isn't legal, it's strategic. And this is possibly Donald Trump's worst decision in the entire Iran campaign. Sorry, but it's about to get even more complicated, but at least you'll understand what's actually going on. Since 1979, the United States of America has been running the so-called Freedom of Navigation program. That is, they regularly send their warships through disputed waters in order to protect the principle that straits are open to absolutely everyone. Trump isn't saying for no reason that the US has supposedly been guarding the Hormuz Strait for 50 years. In reality, yes, US warships really do appear there constantly, precisely to ensure that no one takes over the strait. And this is exactly where things get most delicate for Donald Trump. The presence of American ships as well as Chinese ones in the South China Sea happens according to the same principle. This is exactly the argument the US uses against China's claims in this region, saying these are international waters, even if they're disputed, and that they will send their warships here to prove to the Chinese that no, this is not your territory, these are disputed waters. And moreover, in May 2026 at the summit in Beijing, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping reached a common position. No tariffs, no militarization of the Hormuz Strait, everything according to international law. Well, so that this status quo in the South China Sea is also not disturbed. And now, the most important thing. What will happen if the United States itself imposes a fee for passage through the Hormuz Strait? It's very simple. This will immediately encourage countries like China, which have long sought greater control over the South China Sea, to do the same. America is destroying with its own hands the argument it has used to defend the freedom of the seas for half a century. And then a confrontation near Taiwan will simply become inevitable.
Subtitles created by Dima Kosaka.
While verbal battles are taking place in the Middle East region, a real war is escalating. On the US side, it looks like this. The United States Central Command has announced a new wave of strikes. Iranian air defense systems, coastal radars, missile and unmanned systems, and small boats have been hit. Fighter jets, Navy ships, kamikaze drones, and for the first time, by the way, kamikaze sea drones have been used. This is the debut of a new class of weapon in this conflict, which Ukraine has long used against Russian ships. And now I'll quote the US Central Command. The Strait of Hormuz is a vital corridor for global trade. Iran does not control it, and Trump commented on it even more simply during Meet the Press. We bombed them to hell last night. From Iran's side, it looks like this. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps reported strikes on US targets in 5 different countries. In Bahrain, they struck the Sheikh Issa Air Base, which is their helicopter maintenance hub and drone control center. In Kuwait, they struck the Patriot air defense system. Reports claim that they even destroyed a launcher. They struck the fuel storage tanks. The ANFPS early warning system was also hit. In Jordan, the Iranians struck Prince Hassan Air Base, where ammunition and fuel depots were burning. And notably, they even struck Oman, where American radars were destroyed, and another strike hit Qatar. According to Iranian data, about 20 people were killed in their country during a week of American strikes. Plus, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed that 3 American soldiers were also killed in Kuwait, but the US Central Command denied this information. The response from the IRGC to Trump's statement today was quite fierce. Here is the quote. "The Hormuz Strait is our territory, and we will not allow a bandit, child-killing army from the other side of the world to continue its illegal interference. Shipping can resume only if the US stops its military activity in the strait, and if Washington continues its actions, it could lead to more serious incidents on the global oil and gas market." Well, it's kind of a hint that they might do it again. Now, Trump claims that the strait is open and functioning, but American officials claim that they allegedly escorted about 20 ships along the coast of Oman in a single day. But ship tracking data paints a slightly different picture for us. According to Kepler, only 6 ships passed through the strait on Sunday. That's the lowest number in the past 5 weeks. Not a single gas carrier passed through all weekend, and most of the ships that did pass simply turned off their transponders while passing through. In other words, they were moving like smugglers, hiding themselves, not under the protection of the Americans. Meanwhile, Brent crude oil is already almost $80 a barrel. Bottom line. Formally, the following happened today. The US has resumed a full-scale war against Iran and declared itself the guardian of the Hormuz Strait. They reinstated the blockade of Iran and demanded a 20% fee for passage through the strait. In essence, Washington has claimed exactly the same right that it fought against Tehran for denying. The only difference is the price. And the cynical truth is that legally, both sides are wrong, both Iran and the US. Such a right does not give either Iran or America the right to charge tolls. And that's not a minor detail. If the 2 biggest players come to some agreement right now and someone starts charging for passage through the strait, then the principle on which all global maritime trade is based will collapse. And the first to happily take advantage of this precedent will be China in the South China Sea. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.